Hello, friends. Hello, everybody. We're starting off this new week of Bhagavatam. Today I got the stream coming from a new spot, so hopefully everything's technically okay. And let's jump in. What I wanted to show, let's kind of back up and do a little bit of a review. What we have been talking about is not quite that, but this. What we had been talking about was Narada asks Brahma, what's the universe made of, where does it come from, how is it created, etc., etc. And Brahma begins his answers by explaining that there are 5 primary elements. There's 5 primary entities in the universe. You can see them on the diagram in a little bit darker and not a little bit darker color. So there's Jiva, the big round circle at the beginning. That's very important. Then there's Kala, which is time. Jiva is consciousness. Then there's the individual nature, which is Swabhava. It's that thing that looks like a pill. Then you have those 2 big rectangles, Karma and Dravya. Karma are activities, things which are driven, the basis for activities, and then Dravya, the basis for objects. So we talked. Narada also asked Brahma, how do these five constituents of reality become reality that we know? And Brahma said it's because the energy that consciousness is interacting with has 3 inherent qualities to it, which we are going to pretty much stick with the Sanskrit words for them because there's not really suitable English translations, but it's sattva, rajas, tamas, which you could say is just clarity, passion, and darkness, or you could say it's transparent, translucent, and opaque energy. Then he explained how when Jiva is able to interact with the external reality because of time allows it to act through its swabhava or nature. So that's how the 5 things are able to interact. Jiva, 1, external reality. 2, Jiva is able to interact with the external reality because of time, allowing it to have actions. And those actions are according to its individual nature, swabhava. So those 5 things, when the individual nature is touched by the different qualities of the external world, it changes the jiva into things evolve as a result. Like when you put catalysts into mixtures, new things come out. So Sattvaguna allows. What Sattvaguna does is generate something called Mahatattva, which is the ability for external things to be perceived. So consciousness, you could say, gets the ability to perceive external objects through Sattvaguna. And then Rajaguna comes and touches that thing, and it gives consciousness something called ahankara, which is the sense of wanting to do something with those objects, to interact with those objects from a particular point. If you, once you have awareness of an object, then you become individualized to that object and to other observers of the object. Like if I'm looking at a chair, then that defines me as different from the chair, and it also defines me different from other observers of the chair who observe it in different ways. So by getting Mahatattva, which is the ability to comprehend reality, consciousness then gets ahankara, which is individuality. Then that consciousness with its individuality expressed, it then touches Tamaguna and then Sattvaguna and then Rajaguna again. And that this produces Dravya Shakti. This enables or affects the Dravya or the objects in the world. The previous stuff, the Mahatattva and the Ahamkara, it affects the Jiva's actions. Our actions are based on how we perceive, and therefore who we think we are. Just see how people take different kinds of actions in relation to the distress in America right now, depending on who they believe they are and who they believe they aren't. So the Mahatattva is the way that they perceive the event. The way that they perceive the event is because of and reinforces the type of person that they think they are. Chinese person sees the event in one way, a black person sees the event in the other way, a rich white person sees the event in another way, a poor white person sees an event in another way. And then they all react to the event differently. So all these things, Mahatattva and Ahankar, they affect the karmas, the way people act. Then the way people act then affects the things which are created, the things which are produced. So Ahankar, which is the basis for action, then interacts with the three qualities of nature again to produce different things. It produces three categories of things from the three types of energies. It produces, from Tamaguna, it produces something called Dravya Shakti, which is the power to make tangible objects. Now this is all within the category of Dravya. You'll see why, because the next thing, when Ahankara with Sattvaguna, it produces Jnana Shakti, but it's the Jnana Shakti is the power to perceive those objects. It can be conscious of those objects already, but the consciousness is not able to perceive the specifics of it. Like I'm conscious that there's a protest going on somewhere in America right now, but I can't perceive any details of it. So I have a Mahatattva level of awareness of a protest going on in America, but I don't have a visual level or a sonic level of it. Because although it's perceivable to the Mahatattva, it's not perceivable to the Jnana Shakti for me. So that's the difference. And then when Ahankara is in contact with Rajaguna, it produces something called Kriya Shakti. So these are the three basic energies that generate the further evolution. We got three stages of evolution in how the reality is created. The first stage of evolution is how consciousness is gifted with the ability to act and for those actions to bear fruit over time so that it can interact with Dravya. So the first objects, so that the thing is you get these five, that's the first stage of evolution, is how these five things exist. Consciousness and the external reality and the bridge between those things, which is action and time and swabhava, which is the individual nature that comes as a result of perceiving those. That's the first stage of reality, the establishment of the link between those two. Then the second stage of evolution of reality is how the qualities Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas affect this link. So how they produce something called Mahatattva, which is a capacity for interaction between the two. Then they produce the Ahamkar, which is the sense of individual action and individualization in the external world. Then the Ahankar is going to produce much more specific things with these three qualities, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. It's going to produce, so Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva are going to produce these three potencies or powers, which are Dravya, the potency to make tangible things, Kriya, the potency to interact with those things, and Jnana, the potency to perceive those things. That's just a recap of what we did so far. Is it all clear? Hi, everybody. Melissa, Bardo. Thank you, Bardo. Michelle. So, if that's clear, we'll move on to the new subject. The new subject, Abhishek. The new subject is this, which I gave you like a coming attraction of last time we spoke. So let's keep that on screen and I'll read you this bit. Narada wants to know more about how each of these three energies, which is Dravya Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, how they create the tangible universe that you actually see and interact with. So first he asked Brahma to explain how tangible objects evolve from Dravya Shakti. So if you look at that diagram, you're going to see it looks a little bit like a flag, depending on, maybe it's an Indian flag or an Italian flag, depending on your swabhava, you'll see it differently. The reason why it's divided into three sections, if you look carefully at the top, if you can see it, there's three divisions to it. The one on the right is what Kriya Shakti does. That's the grayish area. The one in the middle, which is white, is what Jnana Shakti does. And then the one on the left, the darkest one, is what Dravya Shakti does. So the darkest one is what Tamaguna does. Tamaguna has Dravya Shakti, or consciousness through Tamaguna enables Dravya Shakti, which is ability to create objects. The white thing is Sattvaguna, and that's consciousness through Sattvaguna creates Jnana Shakti, and then consciousness through Rajaguna creates Kriya Shakti. It's not exactly consciousness. Its consciousness has been modified a bit by this point. So it's become a Hankar. Hankar coming through these Shaktis, coming through these Gunas, generates these Shaktis. So Narada's first asking, tell me about Dravya Shakti. What does that do? Brahma explained that Dravya Shakti first produces the element space, the container in which all other objects can exist, and space is tangible by its quantifier sound. So there's a lot of information to unpack in that. So first of all, obviously the simplest thing is going to evolve first. And I don't know if it's obvious or not, but according to this principle, sensibly, the simplest thing evolves first, and then it becomes more and more complex as it evolves. So the first physical, tangible element to evolve is space. Space is almost nothing, right? It's very easy to get space. Space is the quality of space. Brahma explained is just that it's a container in which other objects can exist. It's not almost not even an object unto itself. It's more like a super object in which other things exist. It's just, space is just the place, the area in which other things exist. We're not talking about outer space necessarily, although outer space is a type of space. You're also talking about how much space you have in your closet, how much space you have in your house, how much space there is between you and another person, how much space is in a room, the dimensions of a room, the dimensions of a country. That's space. X, Y, Z, those coordinates are space. And so that coordinate system of height, width, and depth is generated first. It's the first tangible thing that's generated. It's considered a tangible thing because it has a quantifiable thing. Each element that evolves is differentiated as an element because it has a new thing which can be perceived about it. And that's called its tanmatra. The thing to it which makes it what it is. The thing about it that makes it what it is. So what do you think it is for space that you can perceive? How do you perceive space? Can you taste space? Like nobody eats space. That would be a very, very frugal diet. The space diet. You would lose weight. You can't taste space. You can't smell space. You can only smell stuff that's in space. You don't smell space itself. You can't see space. You can only see the things that are in it. That's why it's black. When you look up at the sky at night, it's black, and you can see stars in there, but the space itself is empty. Or you can't see. Maybe you can see particles in the air. Maybe you can see furniture in a room, but you can't see the space itself. So space is not perceivable by smell. It's not perceivable by taste. It's not perceivable by sight. It's not even perceivable by touch. You can't touch it. You move your hand right through it. And regardless of whether you're in an open, gigantic open space in the mountains, or if you're in a tiny closet, if nothing is touching your skin, you wouldn't know the difference if you only had skin. Well, what is it about space that can be perceived then? It's perceived through sound. Space is perceived by sound. And that is actually the difference. That tells you whether you're in a big open mountain range or if you're inside a closet, is the way that the reverb echoes in your ear. The properties of a room. For example, all the audio engineers in the world will go and look at a room and talk about its dimensions. And if you want to change the audio properties of a room, you change its dimensions. You change how one face of the room is related to the other face of the room. How the space is relating to each other. If you look at the difference in pitch, for example, between a high pitch and a low pitch, you'll find that the wavelengths are compressed or extended. So the size of the space allows a wave to exist. So basically, what we're talking about here is evolution. And so evolution is going to be driven by movement or change. So the most basic level of movement is the sound wave. And that's what's in space. So the first thing that evolves from the Dravi Shakti, when consciousness puts its energy on it and puts energy on the potential to create objects, the first object that can evolve into being is just space. And that is hearable. Right? Space is tangible by its quantifier, sound. All right? Now, space, Brahma explains, then evolves. What's it going to evolve into next? The next simplest element. The thing that's just a little bit different from space. So what's it going to evolve into? Water right away? Earth? It's going to evolve into air. Space evolves into air. Air is tangibly quantified by the sense of touch. Now, each element also contains the qualities of the evolutionary previous element. So air also carries sound. So air has its unique quantifier is touch, but air is also perceivable by sound. You can hear space. You can only hear space. You can't touch it, see it, or taste it, or smell it. So every element is then going to be able to transmit sound, because every element is going to evolve from space. But the new evolutes that come out from space are going to have additional qualities that they can be perceived by. The additional quality of air is touch. Why touch? Well, first of all, it's because what is touch? Touch is the sense of change in pressure and temperature on the skin. And that's done by air moving on the skin. And this is why you'll always see, in any romantic setting, there's always a breeze. Because the breeze will excite the sense of touch, and that's what the primary sense in romance is, touch. So what happens here is the sound, because space has the capacity for sound, then it's able to generate sound wave. Wave is a movement. Air is nothing but moving space. That's what the element of air is. Air is a movement in space. So sound actually produces the evolution from space to air. Sound waves in the spatial element generate movement, which creates wind, aka air, which is the gaseous substance. This movement is key to the sense of touch, which activates when two adjacent surfaces move in relation to one another. So touch is the ability to sense that things are moving. Like you can feel this. Or you can even feel this. Kinda. Not as much as this. And also, if this was changing temperature, you would be able to feel it. So those are the three things that touch is sensitive to. And that's enabled by air. And then Burma gives a little footnote or a little extra quality. It says air is a very special element because it supports life by creating power and alertness in the body and mind. So air is a special element because it's not just for sensation, but air is also something which creates a link between consciousness and the tangible objects. So it creates links between ahamkar, etc., with tangible things. You'll learn more about that. Sure. Let's see if we got any questions at this point. Thanks. Yes. Yes. All right, good. We can continue. Narada asks, what drives this evolution in the elements? What's driving the evolution? What's making these things change? What's making sound vibrate in space and then create air? Brahma answers, it's the constant influence of time and destiny, karma, themselves driven by the psychology of the desires held by the living entities who inhabit the evolving universe. So what is pushing the evolution is ultimately the conscious entities that are in it, in this system. If you remove conscious entities from the system, nothing happens in the system. It's like if you take a battery out of a electronic device. It doesn't do its thing anymore. So the battery in this whole process is the conscious entities. Conscious entities, they have volition and will to act, which is their destiny, their karma, and that's being enabled by time. So it's the constant influence of time and karma on the proto-objects, on Dravya Shakti, that's rooted in the consciousness' desire to do something with them, that's causing this stuff to inch forward and move forward and change. So this to me is very interesting because in the modern atheistic concept of evolution is very compatible with this basic paradigm that the Bhagavatam is presenting, except for one thing, is that if you remove consciousness, which is the theism, the divine element, if you remove consciousness from the equation, how do you answer the question of what is pushing the things to change? What's causing the system to change? Why is there energy being exerted on the system to evolve? Where's that energy coming from? So the Bhagavatam has this little additional point to it that makes it more sensible. It's that there's this irreducible eternal principle of awareness, which is the foundation of reality. When that awareness acts upon the singularity, which is the potential for reality, then that thing evolves. Eminent Blaze has an interesting point. It must be a primitive form of sound which evolves, because otherwise it needs medium to travel, which is normally perceivable by us. Yeah, it's a primitive, it's the rawest form of sound. Our ear, the human ear, isn't designed to hear sound from space directly, because we don't exist in the vacuum of space. But the human ear is designed to hear the sound as it comes through the mediums that are around us. But yet, by perception of sound, we perceive the space. Barbara, no, I'm fine. Okay, so we continue. Brahma continued to explain the evolution of tangible elements. He says air evolves into fire, which produces light and is therefore tangible through sight. And that's Brahma's little sutra. So his little sutra is that the first evolute from Dravi Shakti is space, which is perceivable through sound. And then the sound in space produces movement, which is air. And then air is perceivable by touch. Then air evolves into fire, which fire produces light and therefore is perceivable by sight. You can also perceive fire by touch because it generates heat as well. And you can also perceive fire by sound. See, so each evolute contains the qualities of the previous evolute but adds a new one. So space only had sound. It's the only way you can perceive it. Everything else is going to also have sound, can be perceived by sound. That's why you can say it can be a medium for sound or a transmitter of sound. Then air has sound plus touch. And then fire has sound, touch, and now sight. And how do you get from air to fire? It's very simple. When you move adjacent surfaces next to each other, what do you get? Heat. So we get space has the potential for waves. Waves generate movement. Now the waves start to move against each other, and that generates heat. So the movement in space is air, and then the friction that's caused in air is heat. And that's the third element, known as fire. Fire is also tangible through the previous sensations. Its heat can be felt in the sense of touch, and its sound can be heard. So if you're looking at this diagram, you can see that we're going down, right? Space has sound as its property. It generates air, which has touch as its property. And that generates fire, which has sight as its property. Fire evolves into water, which is tangible by taste. Water is also tangible through the previous sensations. We can see it, feel it, and hear it. So how do you get from fire to water is an interesting divide. It's called Gandanta in astrology, how you get across from a fire element to a water element. It's an interesting break. It's a difficult evolutionary leap. But you get to fire and water through precipitation. It's the heat acting on something which dries the thing out, but actually the process of drying something out just removes water from it and precipitates water. So the potential that the Dravi Shakti had to produce water, the Dravi Shakti is the proto element of all the elements, so it has all the potential to evolve these 5 things, but it can't release the potential to create water until there's fire. Once there's fire, it can evaporate that potential from the Dravi Shakti and then cause it to become water. So this is the same system that we're talking about when you talk about Indra and Agni and Apas, as you learn with the nakshatra gods, that cycle of how Agni allows the water to be stolen from the river or the ocean. Stolen from the ocean, and then Indra releases the water from Agni's grasp as the clouds, and then it becomes the river, returns to the ocean, becomes Apas. That whole cycle that we see in our weather system is a basic repetition of this basic evolutionary principle of how fire or heat takes the water out from its warehouse, you might say, from the ocean, and it spreads it out into where people exist. So water is for taste. That's why your mouth is always wet. What water does, I think, technically or in more detail, is it dissolves the molecules in a thing, and then those dissolved molecules can be sensed by the different receptors that you have for them. So if you ever want to experiment with this, just dry out your tongue and then eat a chocolate and see how much of it you taste, and then let your tongue get wet again and then eat the same chocolate. Now finally, we're going to get water evolving into earth. Water evolves into earth, which is tangible through the sense of smell. Earth is tangible through all the previous sensations as well. We can taste, see, feel, and hear it. So now you get to the most complete object, which is the solid thing. You got a liquid thing, you got a gaseous thing, you got the space for the liquids, gases, and solids to exist in, and then you got fire, which is this energy. So it's a little different than modern physics, which just categorizes solids, liquids, and gases. We have these two other things. We have solids, liquids, gases, and we have fire, which is like energy, the thing that produces heat, the thing that produces light. And then we have space, the area in which they all... I think classic physics has a spot for recognizing space. They call it ether. Now, the way that earth comes from water is the same principle of how sedimentation comes out from water. So it's the sediment of the particulate mixtures in liquid evolves into solid. The sense of smell detects solid particles that enter the nose. Alright, so I think that's as much as we want. Let me see how much time we've actually been on. Yeah, I think that's as much time as we want to cover. As much stuff as we want to cover in one sitting. I'll see if you have other questions. I see you got one or two questions already. See if you have other questions while I'm still here. And while I'm waiting for those questions, I'll just give you a brief look ahead to what's coming, next. The look ahead is... Naren's going to say, how does the Gyan Shakti... We only covered that dark area of the graph. How Dravya Shakti evolves. How the potential for objects evolve. Now Narada wants to know, okay, how does Gyan Shakti evolve? Because Gyan Shakti is the ability to perceive these specific things. So that must be evolving in tandem with the existence of the perceivable objects. And then he's going to ask how Kriya Shakti evolves. Kriya Shakti is the active energy. So it's going to be the senses that perceive the things and the senses that enable us to act with the things, to act upon the things. So in the next two segments, which we'll cover tomorrow, we'll hear about how Gyan Shakti and Kriya Shakti evolve. So that will complete that whole graph or chart. And then a brief section to end the chapter on how now that you've gotten individualized elements and you're done with your third stage of universal evolution, how do you get to the fourth stage in which these things begin to combine? So kind of like in modern terms, the end of the third stage of evolution would give you distinct atoms, different atoms, but we're not going to think of atoms as helium, hydrogen, etc. But here you would think of atoms in the sense of the atom earth, the atom water, the atom fire, the atom air, the atom space, and the atom of perception of those tangibles, the atom of sound, the atom of touch, the atom of smell, the atom of sight, the atom, etc. All those parts could be thought of as atoms or irreducible elements. But the fourth stage of evolution is how do these atoms combine to make molecules that make structures. So the chapter is going to end by Brahma explaining a bit about how that happens. And it's a very difficult stage in evolution to surpass. All right, let's see if you guys have any questions about the stuff that we've covered today. Here we go. Is the Higgs boson particle an immediate evolute of Mahatattva? I don't even know what the Higgs boson particle is any more than anybody else does. So I really wouldn't know. Reminded me of the koshas and increasing destiny destiny? Is there? Yeah, there's a connection. Abhishek, evolution means changing form, but it's hard to imagine how space can transform into air and how air can transform into fire. Fire needs something else to burn and so forth. So you're not talking about fire. We've used the word fire here, but we're not talking about the fire that burns on matches. And evolution means change in the form, right? So the basic thing is just Dravya Shakti. That evolves into space. The reason why that's considered a change in form is because now Dravya Shakti can be heard. And it's not a particular space. It's not anybody's space. It's not my space in my closet versus your space in your kitchen. It's just space. Then space is it's the atom of space. It's the proto-space. Then space evolves into air, because movement in space by the sound waves generates air. So that's considered an evolution or a new form because it has a new perceivable aspect to it. It can be felt. It generates it generates the, I don't know what they are, the impulses or the waves or the discharges that the consciousness can register as the sense of touch. So it's not anybody's air. It's not like the air in my room or the air from my fan or the air from your fan. It's not the air that's over India or the air that's over the Atlantic Ocean. It's just air. It hasn't become any specific air yet. It's just the atom of air. Similarly with fire. Fire it's just heat. It's the energy of what happens when you rub things together. Because the air is causing things to rub together now. It's not a fire that's burning the California forest. It's not a fire on somebody's lighter who's lighting up a smoke. It's not a fire in somebody's sacrificial altar. It's just the energy of heat, energy, that radiant energy that produces light. It's just the atomic form of fire. Similarly with water. It's not it's not H2O. It's not the water that you drink. It's not the water in your cup or my cup. It's the atom of liquidity. And the same thing with earth. It's not like my land, your land, this land, that land, a mountain, a rock. It's not that. It's the atomic form of solidity. Now, Brahma is going to ask, Nara is going to ask, well, how do these atomic forms of these things produce the real things that we touch and feel and see and taste, etc.? So Marcelo says nothing can be created or destroyed, it only changes form. So right, the basic form there is called Prakriti. It's in the 5 elements. The 5 irreducible elements are the basis of reality, and those things are transmuting or evolving. And it's actually really just the Dravya thing, or the Prakriti, which is transmuting and evolving. And it's being driven by consciousness. If Higgs boson, if it's the fundamental particle after which every particle evolves, then it's Mahatattva. Because that's what Mahatattva is. Alright. So I'll see you tomorrow. Hope this was helpful and clear. Tomorrow we're going to see how Kriya Shakti and Jnana Shakti evolve. Thank you very much.